Hi, this is the video presentation for the CHI paper Q-Chef, the Impact of Surprise Eliciting Systems on Food-Related Decision-Making, which is co-authored by myself, Kaz Grace, and my collaborators Elanor, Natalia, and Hamish. It was also supported by the University of Sydney and the Australian Research Council. The more variety in what we eat, the healthier we tend to be. The more broadly we read, the more empathic we tend to be. Employers these days will seek out employees for not just their depth of knowledge, but for their breadth of knowledge, because it makes them more able to tackle new and unfamiliar circumstances. In each of these cases, it's diversity of behavior, instead of or in addition to any specific goal, that makes the benefit. Algorithmic approaches to increasing the diversity of behaviors taken by a particular user group, they've been shown to have a variety of very positive effects. They increase engagement, they increase user satisfaction, and they do increase the diversity of what gets selected, not just what gets presented. This kind of research has shown the potential of applying these sorts of principles, but there's still a number of unsolved questions. How does diverse content affect the user experience? How does user decision-making actually get affected by the presence of diverse content? And what are the best ways to present or lay out diverse content to the user? Each of these, of course, is not a broad, generalizable, empirical research question, but rather a specific design question. And that's the kind of question we're interested in answering here. So this is a story about Q-Chef, the curious chef, with some permissivity on the acronym there. Q-Chef, a mobile app that you can get from the App Store or Play Store if you like, is an algorithmic diversification aid applied to the domain of diet. In other words, we want to see if we can get people to eat more broadly. We use a content-based recommender for capturing people's food preferences, about how they think about ingredients and what they think about recipes, as well as a Bayesian surprise model that captures their familiarity with certain pairs of ingredients appearing together. To give an example of the surprise model and what this sort of system thinks is surprising, as that's the kind of core of our diversification approach. Here's a meal where the system is suggesting that we try this sweet and tangy chili beef recipe, which is judged as surprising. I'm not sure if you can see that in the video, but among its ingredients are orange juice and beef. Our system says that those have a low probability of occurring together in a recipe, and as well because this recipe includes soy sauce and mango. And we find that on the broad population level, there's a very strong quantitative agreement between what our system says is surprising and what our users say is surprising, on the order of like a R-squared of 0.6. The much more difficult question is, how do we predict what's surprising for each individual? And there's some details on how we use a combination of this information theoretic Bayesian approach to surprise, coupled with some classifiers that take in information about specific people and specific recipes to try and make those judgments. So you can select some meals, put them into your meal plan, get instructions on how to make them. Obviously, it's a recipes app, there's recipes in it. We're really looking into two research questions. What are the factors that influence decision-making when selecting what to cook using an app like this one? And then, how do those decision-making processes change in the presence of surprising recipes? So 42 participants completed our study. They selected a recipe that they intended to cook, and then they sat down with us for a semi-structured interview about the decision-making processes. So our thematic analysis used two independent coders who used an iterative consensus-based approach to turn 384 quotes into 5 higher-order themes that we feel together capture food decision-making, at least for our participants with this app in this particular context. So I want to go through what those 5 higher-order themes were. The first one was this idea that there's a huge degree of safety and comfort in the familiar. The second category is about individual decision mentalities. This captures all of the reasons why people would choose to cook or not cook a thing that are just very practical. The third broad area that we found was this notion of a social ecology, which we named after Murray Bookchin's concept of the same name, which refers to this constantly present, evolving sociocultural network of ideas that surround food and decision-making. So this is the cultural heritage, the social connection, the things you saw your grandmother cook. This is pressures into and out of an individual that reflect the fact that we're part of a social network and that food is this huge component of how we relate to other people. The fourth thing that we found was this idea of a skill inventory. People thought in this very practical, almost video game way about the things that they know how to do. Oh yes, I've got that. I know how to fry. Oh, I don't know how to deep fry. And then the fifth one is the one that relates most closely to this idea of diversification that we've been talking about. It's this idea of moments of exploration, this point in time where, despite all of the practical layers that I've already mentioned, participants would choose to try something new. So armed with this kind of 5-part model, how do those processes change when they receive unusual recipes? To do that, we performed a student's t-test on the 94 first level codes, comparing those participants in our control versus our experimental groups. The first one, and this is kind of gratifying, the strongest of the effects that we observed, the code enjoys new things, was much, much higher in the surprising yet tasty group. They chose to talk about their enjoyment of new things at a much higher level when they'd been presented with new things. Seems pretty straightforward. Also higher in the surprising yet tasty group was this discussion about how it's comfortable to alter something familiar. Many of the surprising recipes that people chose, they chose because they were somehow connected to things that they already knew how to cook. We also observed 3 near significant results, and these were all observed less frequently in the surprising yet tasty group. This kind of design-led study shows that there is a huge potential for algorithmic dietary diversification, but that the designers of future such systems would need to take a couple of things into account. The first one is to remember the obvious, which is that whenever we want to eat, immediate needs can overshadow longer-term goals. Secondly, you have to remember that curiosity is also a trait found in greater or lesser extents in different people. That means that there are some people who are going to always be extremely keen to try new things, and there are going to be some people who are much more hesitant. It's also important to note that nostalgia and familiarity and connections to culture are a huge part of food, much more than just tasty and healthy, which is the sorts of things that we tend to reduce stuff to in the computing domain. And additionally, people trust recipes based on their sources. S-O-U-R, no pun intended. So to summarize, we developed a 5-part model of food decision making and its impact on behavior change systems of this particular kind, algorithmic diversification of diet. And then we demonstrated the effect of the presence of surprising recipes on those decision making processes in a lab study. So we showed that people exhibited neophilia, we showed that they exhibited nostalgia, we showed that they exhibited comfort in certain kinds of food, and we showed that they talked a lot about their skill and expertise, and that the rates at which they did those things increased or decreased when they were presented with surprising material. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for listening to the talk, and I hope to see you in person next year.